7:18 a.m. local time. The Caribbean Sea looks unusually calm, the kind of calm experienced sailors notice right away. The surface is almost perfectly flat, the wind is light, and visibility stretches well past 10 nautical miles. For a U.S. Navy carrier strike group, these are ideal operating conditions. Nothing concealed, nothing unexpected, nothing that should raise concern, at least until the radar display begins to change. Inside the Combat Information Center, aboard the USS George Washington, the quiet routine is broken by a radar operator. Contact bearing 211, multiple surface returns. It's not one vessel, not two. 5 contacts appear nearly at the same moment, moving in a coordinated pattern that doesn't match normal maritime traffic. Initial range, 21 nautical miles. Speed consistent. Course angled directly across the strike group's projected path. The atmosphere shifts instantly. No one laughs. No one asks unnecessary questions. Civilian ships simply don't move like that. On the bridge, the captain of the USS George Washington studies the tactical display without changing posture. The carrier, so more than 100,000 tons of steel, continues on the same heading and speed. No sudden turn, no acceleration, no early maneuver. Within the U.S. Navy, changing course too early can send the wrong signal. Automated classification systems begin analyzing the radar returns, hull shapes, superstructure outlines, radar signatures. Within moments, the data becomes clear. Venezuelan Navy, 5 warships, mixed formation. The distance shrinks to 16 nautical miles. The surface warfare officer delivers the update in a steady voice. The formation indicates a deliberate intercept course. This is not a routine shadowing maneuver, not a distant escort. The ships are moving to cross the carrier's path, a blocking action meant to limit movement and force a reaction without a single shot being fired. A calculated signal, a message delivered through positioning alone. USS George Washington sends a transmission over the international bridge-to-bridge radio frequency. Unidentified Venezuelan naval vessels, this is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. State your intentions. There is no answer, no static, no weak signal, just silence. The range closes to 12 nautical miles. Electronic monitoring systems across the strike group detect new signals. Venezuelan search radars are now clearly active. Every emission is captured, analyzed, and logged. Frequencies, pulse patterns, signal strength. Each piece of data is time-stamped and stored. Inside the Combat Information Center, tension doesn't come from fear. It comes from focus. This is exactly the kind of situation crews prepare for again and again. A moment where every action is recorded and every decision may carry wider implications. A junior officer speaks quietly. Recommend course adjustment. The response comes immediately. Negative. Maintain heading. The carrier continues forward. Not out of stubbornness, but because of established doctrine. International law, operational rules, and tactical advantage all support holding course. Turning now wouldn't reduce the risk. It would change the meaning of the encounter entirely. Through long-range optics, the 5 ships become visible. Gray hulls, low silhouettes, older vessels, but moving with clear purpose. This is no navigational mistake. They are measuring reaction time, testing restraint, watching to see whether a U.S. carrier will hesitate under pressure. 8 nautical miles. No weapons are brought into position. No alarms echo through the ship. Aircraft operations remain secured below deck. On the surface, everything appears calm. Underneath that calm, every system is fully alert. USS George Washington isn't responding with aggressive moves or dramatic signals. It responds with awareness. Every heading shift, every radar sweep, every second of silence is documented. The carrier does not need to maneuver to demonstrate control. Its presence already speaks clearly enough. Then, quietly, an internal order moves through the ship. Log everything, shift to condition monitoring. From that moment on, the situation is no longer routine. It has become a record. And at sea, records often matter long after the encounter itself is over. The distance keeps shrinking. 8 nautical miles becomes 7, then 6. The Venezuelan formation begins to tighten. Each ship adjusts its heading in small, precise movements. No sudden turns, no chaotic maneuvers. Everything looks controlled, almost routine. But the coordination reveals careful planning. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS George Washington, the tactical display updates constantly. The 5 surface contacts are now fully identified as Venezuelan naval vessels. Their movement pattern is clear. They are positioning themselves around the carrier's projected path. 2 ships push slightly ahead of the group. 3 others spread outward, widening their positions across the water. It forms a classic blocking layout. From a distance, the scene appears calm, 5 gray ships slicing through the bright blue Caribbean. No smoke, no visible tension, no weapons in sight. But at sea, positioning tells the real story, and the geometry is unmistakable. These vessels are not escorting the carrier. They are not simply observing from a distance. They are maneuvering to restrict space, shaping the water around the carrier's path. At 5 nautical miles, the message is impossible to misunderstand. A second radio call goes out from the carrier, steady and professional. Venezuelan naval vessels, you are approaching a United States Navy carrier operating in international waters. Maintain a safe distance and alter course immediately. Once again, the radio stays silent. No response. But something else changes. 2 of the Venezuelan ships increase speed. Their engines push them several knots faster than the rest of the formation. The move compresses the group and sharpens the angle of approach. Their bows begin pointing slightly across the carrier's starboard side, reducing the open water available ahead. In naval strategy, this kind of maneuver has a name: tactical pressure. Smaller forces sometimes use it to push a larger force into reacting. The goal is not a collision. The goal is to force a visible response. On the bridge of the USS George Washington, nothing changes. The watch team remains composed. Helm orders stay the same. The massive carrier continues forward, cutting a long white wake across the calm sea. The reasoning is straightforward. The vessel with the clearest situational awareness does not surrender space without a reason. Below deck, every sensor across the strike group is active. Electronic warfare teams monitor every radar emission. Surface warfare officers mark each maneuver and heading shift. Nothing is viewed in isolation. Every movement is part of a developing pattern. Soon, Venezuelan radar sweeps become more aggressive. Signal spikes appear clearly across monitoring systems. They are actively building their own surface picture, and every signal they transmit is being recorded. Inside the CIC, a brief exchange breaks the quiet. Closest point of approach projected. CPA under 1 nautical mile if current courses are maintained. That is close. Close enough to attract international attention. Close enough to fuel speculation. Close enough to test the discipline of both sides. Even so, no alarms echo through the carrier. There is still no maneuver. Instead, the documentation continues. At 4 nautical miles, the visual picture becomes sharper. Through long-range optics, activity can be seen on the Venezuelan ships. Crew members move across the decks, helmets visible. Personnel gathered near the forward sections. Nothing openly aggressive, but nothing casual either. This is not confusion. It is deliberate. For Venezuela, the calculation is both political and tactical. A direct confrontation with a U.S. carrier would be dangerous, but creating tension, forcing attention, forcing a reaction, carries its own value. For the U.S. Navy, the calculation is different. Every unnecessary move risks escalation. Every dramatic signal could be misunderstood. Control, in moments like this, is maintained through discipline rather than displays of force. The carrier's presence already shapes the entire situation. At 3 nautical miles, 1 Venezuelan ship moves slightly ahead of the formation. Its bow slowly angles across the carrier's path. The maneuver is careful, slow, measured, but the intent is unmistakable. Inside the Combat Information Center, the voices remain calm. Contact altering course. A brief pause as the plot updates. Intent consistent with bow crossing. Roger. Continue to monitor. The reply comes without urgency. In moments like this, urgency can spread quickly, and that is something experienced crews avoid. Calm keeps the situation controlled. Above deck, the sea still looks perfectly peaceful. From a distance, it could pass for nothing more than a few ships moving through open water. But beneath that quiet surface, every second is being recorded, every action carefully logged. The Venezuelan ships keep pressing forward. The U.S. Navy does not react. That contrast as pressure met with silence is slowly shaping the entire encounter. Because at sea, the side that forces movement is not always the side in control. Often, the advantage belongs to the side that refuses to move at all. As the distance continues to close, the most noticeable thing aboard the USS George Washington is what does not happen. No alarms, no sudden turns, no raised voices on the bridge. The carrier moves steadily ahead, its bow slicing through the calm Caribbean water, while the engines maintain a constant rhythm. To someone unfamiliar with naval operations, the scene might look passive. For those who understand how the U.S. Navy operates, it signals something very different. It signals control. Inside the Combat Information Center, the full picture is already clear. Every Venezuelan vessel is tracked precisely. Bearing, speed, course adjustments, radar activity. Nothing is left to guesswork. The strike group's awareness extends far beyond the visible horizon. Information flows in from satellites, passive sensors, and monitoring systems working quietly in the background. This is how the Navy prefers to operate. Quietly. A report moves across the consoles. Air picture clean, no fast aircraft detected, no helicopter launches. That detail matters. The absence of air activity tells its own story. Venezuela is applying pressure, but doing so carefully. Close enough to create tension, but not far enough to justify a serious escalation. On the flight deck above, there is still no visible response. Aircraft remain secured below. Crew members continue routine movements. Nothing is staged for display. But below deck, readiness has quietly shifted. The carrier's escorts, destroyers, and cruisers operating with the strike group are fully synchronized. Their sensors feed into the shared operational picture, creating overlapping coverage from several directions around the Venezuelan formation. Every ship in the group sees the same information at the same moment. There are no blind spots. Electronic warfare teams calmly catalog Venezuelan radar signals, pulse patterns, sweep timing, transmission strength. What Venezuela believes is pressure is, in reality, exposure. Every signal they transmit reveals more information. On the bridge, the captain listens as updated calculations arrive. Closest point of approach projections are refined again. The margin remains narrow but manageable. Still, no order is given to maneuver. In naval operations, movement sends a message, and messages are chosen carefully. A junior watch officer notes the situation. No change in their posture, they're still holding intercept geometry. The response is steady. Understood. Continue logging. The Venezuelan ships are now within 3 nautical miles. Close enough for visual identification without optics. Close enough that mistakes could matter. Yet the carrier continues straight ahead. This is not stubbornness, it is doctrine. By maintaining a steady course, the USS George Washington removes uncertainty. If any unsafe maneuver occurs from this point forward, responsibility will be clear, documented, and verifiable. Above the waterline, the scene still looks uneventful. 5 ships, 1 carrier, calm sea. Below that calm surface, however, the reality is very different. The carrier's systems are active in layers, defensive monitoring, formation coordination, continuous analysis. Not because conflict is expected, but because readiness is always maintained. The Navy does not prepare after escalation begins. It prepares so escalation never becomes necessary. Inside the CIC, a quiet confirmation arrives. External surveillance and reconnaissance assets are available if needed. No further explanation is spoken aloud. None is required. The message is simple. Options exist, and options represent strength. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan formation hesitates, not enough to call it a retreat, but enough to notice. Their speed fluctuates slightly. Courses are adjusted again, almost as if they are searching for a reaction that never comes. They are pushing against silence, and at sea, silence can be unsettling. It offers no emotional signal, no feedback, no clear response to measure. It forces the other side to decide what comes next without knowing how it will be received. The U.S. Navy understands this dynamic well. The carrier continues forward, water parts smoothly along the bow. The wake behind it remains unchanged. Every radar sweep, every course change, every moment of this encounter is being recorded. Not for headlines, not for dramatic statements, for the record. And within that record, one detail is becoming increasingly clear. The side applying pressure is not the side defining the situation. The side that remains steady is. Then something happens. Quietly, in plain view. There is no alarm, no sudden movement, no raised voices. From the outside, nothing seems different. The carrier holds its course. The sea stays calm. The Venezuelan ships continue approaching at a measured pace. But inside the strike group, a subtle shift takes place. A single decision is made. Not to escalate, not to threaten, but to make the situation unmistakably clear. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS George Washington, the next instruction is delivered in a calm, deliberate tone. Authorize airborne presence. There is no urgency in the words. No dramatic emphasis, just a clear decision. A few minutes later, activity begins on the flight deck. The stillness breaks, not with chaos, but with careful precision. An MH-60R Seahawk helicopter is brought up to the deck. Its rotor blades begin to spin, slowly at first, then faster, slicing smooth circles through the morning air. Deck crews move with practiced efficiency. Every gesture is controlled, every movement familiar. This is not an emergency launch, it is a signal. The helicopter lifts gently from the deck, climbing just high enough to clear the carrier's superstructure before banking outward. It does not rush forward. It does not circle aggressively. Instead, it flies directly toward the Venezuelan formation at a controlled altitude, well within standard safety limits. Inside the Seahawk, its systems activate one by one. Forward-looking infrared sensors, high-resolution optical cameras, precision targeting optics designed for identification. Every system begins transmitting live data. From the Venezuelan ships, the aircraft is immediately visible. A U.S. Navy helicopter approaching steadily from the carrier's starboard side. No weapons displayed, no aggressive posture, just presence. At 2 nautical miles, the Seahawk stabilizes its position. It does not sweep across the ships or fly low over their decks. Instead, it maintains a steady hover at a respectful distance. Then a thin green beam briefly appears. Controlled, deliberate, precise. A laser marker settles momentarily on the bridge area of the lead Venezuelan vessel. Not as a threat, as a signal. You are being observed. Moments later, a radio message follows, calm and unmistakable. Venezuelan naval vessel, this is a United States Navy aircraft. You are conducting unsafe maneuvers in international waters. Your actions are being recorded. Alter course immediately. The message is then repeated in Spanish. For the first time since the encounter began, something changes. Movement becomes visible on the bridge of the lead Venezuelan ship. Crew members step forward. Binoculars rise toward the sky. The ship's bow wave begins to shrink. Its speed drops slightly, first by a knot, then another. Across the formation, the effect spreads. One vessel eases away from the intercept line. Another shifts its heading just enough to create more space. There is no dramatic turn, no sudden retreat, but the geometry begins to change. Inside the Combat Information Center, the updates arrive quietly. Lead contact reducing speed. Formation cohesion decreasing. Closest point of approach increasing. Above them, the Seahawk holds its position, maintaining a steady orbit. Its sensors remain locked on target. The images coming back are sharp and detailed. Hull numbers, deck layouts, crew positions. Everything is captured. Everything is time-stamped. Everything is stored. This is not intimidation. It is documentation made visible. After one final pass, wide, slow, and unmistakable, the Seahawk banks away and begins its return toward the carrier. Behind it, the Venezuelan ships no longer push forward. Their bows are no longer angled to cross the carrier's path. The formation loosens gradually, the pressure fading step by step until the situation becomes unmistakably different. Back aboard the USS George Washington, there is no celebration, no commentary. The carrier never changed course, never increased speed, never reacted outwardly to the shift, because the goal was never to force a retreat. The goal was to define the boundary. No weapons were required, no confrontation was necessary, no escalation took place. Only a clear demonstration that the situation was understood, recorded, and under control. As the Seahawk settles back onto the flight deck, its rotors slowing again, the Venezuelan formation continues drifting farther away. The ships remain visible on the horizon, still present, but no longer in a position to block anything. The moment fades as quietly as it began. But from that point forward, the encounter is no longer uncertain. The outcome has already been decided. When the distance between the ships begins to grow, it happens without any announcement. The Venezuelan vessels do not suddenly turn away. There is no dramatic reversal. Instead, the separation increases slowly. Half a nautical mile, then another. Courses begin to drift apart. Not dramatically, but just enough to remove the tension without forcing either side into an awkward retreat. And that detail says a lot. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS George Washington, the tactical display confirms what the crew already understands. The encounter has shifted. What began as a confrontation is now simply observation. The projected risk of close contact has dropped. The geometry of the situation no longer supports any attempt to block the carrier's path. The carrier continues forward because there is no reason to alter course. On the flight deck, the Seahawk helicopter has already returned. Its rotors are secured. Sensors are powered down, but the data remains. Every radar signal, every course change, every second of silence, and every moment of hesitation. Nothing is summarized, nothing is filtered. Everything is preserved exactly as it happened. This is how the U.S. Navy ends an encounter, by finishing the record. From a distance, the outcome might look uneventful. No weapons used, no escalating warnings, no dramatic show of force beyond the brief appearance of a helicopter. But outcomes at sea are rarely measured by explosions. They are measured by control. Control of space, control of the situation, control of risk. By that standard, the result is unmistakable. Venezuela applied pressure, hoping to trigger a reaction. The United States applied discipline to remove uncertainty. For a moment, the Venezuelan ships gained visibility. But what they revealed in return was far more valuable. Their maneuver patterns, their command decisions, their tolerance for risk, their reaction when faced with calm, controlled presence. They showed exactly how far they were willing to go, and exactly where they stopped. For the U.S. Navy, that information is more important than any headline. As the distance grows beyond 5 nautical miles, the Venezuelan formation stabilizes on a parallel course. They remain in the area and continue to be monitored, but they no longer influence the carrier's movement. No further radio calls are exchanged. None are necessary. The carrier strike group proceeds along its planned route. Operations continue without interruption. Flight schedules remain unchanged. Escort ships maintain their normal positions. The Caribbean Sea gradually returns to the quiet rhythm it had before the first radar contact appeared. But encounters like this don't truly end when ships move apart. They end when analysis begins. Later, far from the Caribbean, specialists will study the recorded data. Patterns will be compared. Assumptions will be tested. Future decisions will be shaped by what was learned here. That process happens quietly, and it never really stops. This is how modern naval power often works. Strength is not proven by who fires first. It is proven by who never needs to. The USS George Washington did not maneuver to demonstrate authority. It did not escalate to prove credibility. It simply held its course, maintained its presence, and allowed professionalism to do the work. The Venezuelan ships approached a carrier strike group expecting a reaction. What they encountered instead was a system, one designed to observe, evaluate, and maintain control without urgency. As the distance markers continue to climb and the contacts fade from immediate concern, the watch on the bridge rotates. Logs are signed. The carrier moves forward, indistinguishable from any other routine day at sea. That is not coincidence, it is doctrine. Because when an encounter ends quietly, without force, without concession, and without confusion, it usually means one thing. Control was never truly in question. And out here in international waters, that is the only outcome that really matters.